Hi, my name is Danny Fleming of the MA Properties team. So my topic now is seller inspection after the accepted offer. What's the difference? Big difference. Big difference. We're starting, first off, let's just explain something about Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a voluntary disclosure state. You don't need to disclose anything about the home to the buyer prior to the buyer making an offer. You just don't need to disclose. If you do disclose, it needs to be accurate disclosure. You can't fudge the disclosure and only disclose half of the things you know about the home and not the other half. It needs to be full disclosure or no disclosure. We're starting to see, well, let me first explain a little bit about the inspection. Massachusetts has licensed inspectors across the state whose job it is to come in and inspect the home, prepare a report. Some of them use photos, some of them do full-blown, description about each component that they've found. Depending on the size of the home, an inspection can take up to about 3 hours. They range in cost. It depends on the size of the home and the inspector, but I think if you were talking about $600 to $1,200, that's about the cost, the range. Obviously, the more expensive is a larger home. The less expensive is a smaller home, but you've still got the cost of the inspector coming out and performing the work. So, and that inspector creates an electronic version of the report and sends it to whomever has engaged him to do the report. You can have a report done by a seller, or you can have a report done by a buyer after they've got an accepted offer. If it's done by the buyer, the seller will never see a copy of the report unless the buyer chooses to give the seller that report via their agent. I would always, as a listing agent, I would always recommend not getting a copy of that report if the buyer is negotiating with you, because it's got to come via the agents to get that report. And Massachusetts law is such that if an agent knows of an issue with a home that might be a material impact to a future buyer, legally we're obliged to let the future buyers know about that. And if as a seller, if you've already disclosed or made a seller's disclosure, and now an inspection is done and the inspector has found something else that might be more of a concern that you didn't know about, you need to change your seller's disclosure so that it now reflects what you know about the home, because you're getting it from a licensed professional. So typically you don't want to see a copy of that inspection report if it's done by a buyer after an accepted offer, especially if they exit the contract. You don't want to be doing that. What do we mean by a seller inspection though? Did you notice something that I said with the buyer doing an inspection, and if they exit the contract, you don't want to know about those things? An inspection after an accepted offer is one of the most common ways that buyers choose to leave a contract to buy a home. They might have just changed their mind. That happens. They might have just changed their mind. It might have been a competing offer situation, and they may now feel that they paid way too much for the home and they're better off getting out of the contract. They may have spotted another home since they made an offer on your home that they think, I want that one more. They may have buyer's remorse. There's many different reasons, or the inspection came back and there's some big issues with the home and they don't have the money to fix it or don't want to take on the headaches. But that's where an offer on a home, an accepted offer on a home, can go south very, very easily during the inspection. It's also, if it doesn't go south, it might also mean that the buyer and the seller go back to the negotiating table because the buyer wants X amount off or wants the seller to fix things like that before they move forward. And so it's a point of contention again, angst associated with the buyer and the seller, that type of deal as at the inspection. But inspection contingencies are a fact of life with most offers. What we're seeing good results with is having the seller do an inspection prior to coming on the market. So what does that mean? The seller gets that licensed inspector in to look at the home, create an inspection report. You only want to do it, a couple of weeks before coming on the market. But they get that inspector in and they get the report themselves. Now, a seller can then choose, if they find something that they didn't even know was an issue, they could actually address it prior to coming on the market, and we just provide receipts saying this was done, it might be $400, and this was done and by the licensed repairman, and that issue that was found on the seller's on the seller inspection has been fixed. Or if you get the inspection, you still don't need to disclose. Just because you know things about your home doesn't mean that you need to disclose them, because, as again, Massachusetts is a voluntary disclosure state. You don't have to disclose. So just because you got an inspection report beforehand, you still don't need to disclose. And if you're not going to disclose, don't share the report with your agent, because it compromises their situation with, again, what I mentioned. If an agent knows an item that will materially impact a buyer in their decision to buy a home, we are legally obliged to let other buyers, potential buyers, know about those issues. So, but what it does is, by providing that seller inspection report, the buyers who are potentially competing for your home, and again, competition only happens on homes in a seller's market where a home is realistically priced. If we're in a seller's market and you're overpricing your home, don't even waste your time doing a seller inspection, because you're not going to get an offer in that first weekend with competing offers. You're going to get an offer 4 weeks later or 6 weeks later, and they're going to do their own inspection. They're going to, even though you've provided one. So again, it's only useful in certain scenarios. But in the scenario where you have competing offers, or you anticipate competing offers because you're in a prime location, you're pricing realistically, there's huge amounts of buyers out there, whereas in a seller's market, anticipating competing offers, then by providing that seller inspection report on MLS means that buyers look at it and they think, this tells me everything I need to know about the home. This is exactly the same sort of information I would get from an inspector. In fact, I was told that inspector's a really good inspector. They'll look at reviews online for the inspector and things like this. So don't get Uncle George to do it. It needs to be a licensed inspector that's got a good reputation. But what happens then is those buyers look at that and they think, I don't need to have an inspection contingency. I can make my offer with no inspection contingency. Or if I was going to drop my inspection contingency anyway, but I was going to fudge or not offer as much as I would have, because I had to leave a little bit in excess of what I've got available, just in case there are issues with the home and I don't know about them because I didn't do an inspection. They don't need to worry about that because they've seen an inspection report. So they'll come in with the strongest offer that they can, because they know that there's only minor issues around the home. There's no major issues. 100%, they're good. Let's make a serious offer because we want this home. So That's the difference between a seller inspection and an inspection after the accepted offer. Inspection after the accepted offer, the buyer could just exit the transaction. You're not going to get as high an offer the second time around, because now the other buyers looking at your home are thinking, that buyer exited at the inspection. I wonder what's wrong with the house. They don't know that the buyer just changed their mind, but it creates a question about what's wrong with the house. Whereas a seller inspection prior to coming on the market, the seller did an inspection, they're confident about their home, and that's why they did an inspection. And guess what? When you read the inspection report, this house is clean. This is a good house. There's only a couple of minor issues. Let's go in with a strong offer, no inspection contingency. That's the difference. You're being proactive, and you're by doing an inspection prior to coming on the market, you're just making that whole series of steps after the offer going through to closing a win-win for all, and a clean and no angst transaction. So there's so much more to talk about all of this. Look, if you would like to know any more or want to talk about it more in length, or all of this sort of stuff, then please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to give you my contact details right now, and I love talking about this stuff, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.